Hey everyone, wanted to make a video lecture to make sure we stay on track regarding the snow day and all that sort of stuff. So these slides will actually correspond with check-in quiz 6. I went ahead and made check-in quiz 6 available, so you should be able to see that by the time this is posted. But regardless, it's going to keep the original due date. You'll just have a really long window of time to do it, and that should address any sort of outage or anything like that. The one thing I will caution you on is that because it has a really large due date, it does not have a timer that will automatically submit it. So make sure you're submitting it. You have 3 attempts like any other. Otherwise, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So we've talked in this class about the paperwork mine. And what the paperwork mine is, just to recap, is it's basically sort of a place and an idea in a way as well, not just a place, but it took 14 different approvals, and this took on average 2 months to retire from the federal government. Imagine that for a second. Just to do one simple thing, to retire, takes 2 months to get all the approval because it had to go to 14 places, a physical piece of paper. So that is one example of a business process that is not efficient. Okay, so one of the big goals behind business process management and business process improvement is to take existing business processes and to be able to make them run more efficiently. Now, a big way we can do that is through technology. Okay, stuff like DocuSign basically would resolve this, because rather than having one physical piece of paper that has to go in a sequential order, one person to the next person, you can send it all out to everyone and then have the system automatically compile it. So that's the sort of thing that we're talking about today. Now, having said that, I want to read this quote off from Hammer and Champy. Okay, it says, Hammer and Champy's basic message was that companies should think of themselves not as conducting tasks within departments. For example, buying raw materials within a purchasing department, but instead as executing business processes, such as taking, assembling, and shipping a customer's order that inherently cut across departments. So essentially, what we want to keep in mind there is that the process lens typically reveals to us that many tasks are going to be unnecessary and can be eliminated. Okay? Now, they go on to say a little bit stronger language there, obliterated. So essentially, what that means to us is that we don't want to be in the mindset of we do a specific task. Okay? That is a mentality that really stifles innovation. And let me explain why. Okay, and I do want to briefly apologize for the emergency alert going off. That's my bad. I can't really avoid that though. Anyway, don't want to get off topic. So when we're talking about not looking at business as doing tasks, and we're instead thinking about them as executing processes, a task is something that someone just does without thinking about it. Whereas a process, we're in the mindset of we're trying to find ways to make it more efficient, to make it be able to be improved. Okay, because the big idea here, what this topic is all about, is business process improvement, not just business processes. So let's back up a little bit and talk about some of the... So what we have here is the functional organization. And essentially, what we have is we have these different functional units. So there's, on this particular graphic, we see 8 functional units listed there. They're processing, operations, warehouse, sales and marketing, research and development, finance and accounting, human resources, and information technology. Now, these are not the only possible functional units that an organization can have. So a functional unit, just to give you a definition, is a group within a group within a business. And these groups, we typically think of them in our day-to-day lives as departments. So you can think about it, you have a warehouse department, you have an operations department, you may have a sales department. That is what a functional unit is. Now, the reason that it's important for us to use that term is because we're going to have the idea here of a cross-functional business process. So let's talk about what a cross-functional business process is. It's a word that can be really intimidating. Okay, cross-functional. All that means is that the process involves multiple functional units. So here we can see the procurement process involves the supply chain management functional unit, the purchasing functional unit, production functional unit, and the inventory functional unit. 4 different departments, or as we say, functional units, are involved in that one business process. We see the order fulfillment process down there. It involves production, inventory management, marketing, and sales. So essentially, one of the key ideas in MIS, one of the topics that you'll hear all the time in MIS, is the idea behind an enterprise resource planning system. And that idea is we want to be able to take all the functional units within the organization, and we want to give them one piece of software that they all use. Now we're going to talk about why that is in just a little bit, but I want you to go ahead and have that thought in your head. So, one of the big problems that a lot of organizations can face is known as the silo effect. So the silo effect is essentially what happens whenever you have different functional units that don't share information with each other. That's a very bad problem, because what that means is that different functional units are not collaborating as they should. Maybe sales has a piece of information that production doesn't. Maybe the marketing team has information that the warehouse team doesn't have. And we can think about specifics of that. Imagine that you have a marketing team who is really promoting a product, but it's not the product that the company is making. It's a different product. Then all that money that's spent in the marketing functional unit is all wasted. And we definitely want to avoid that. So some of those consequences of poor organizational coordination we just talked about, it's a lack of information. It's an information silo. Okay? This can lead to a lot of problems. Some of those problems are listed here. We have delays with increased lead times and increased cycle times. So essentially, increased lead and increased cycle times are both very similar concepts. Here's the difference though. Lead time measures the time elapsed between order and delivery. So that means that it's going to measure your production from the customer's perspective, because the customer is going to place an order. They consider the lead time to be from the time they place the order to the time they receive it. A little bit different than that is cycle time. So cycle time starts whenever you have the actual work beginning on the unit and ends when it's ready for delivery. So instead of beginning for the cycle time when the customer places the order, cycle time begins whenever you actually start the work to whenever you end the work and it's ready for delivery. So it starts a little bit later, ends a little bit earlier. They're both useful measures when you're trying to evaluate the efficacy of an organization's supply chain. Now, some other problems you may face, we just kind of talked about excess inventory. Okay, how do we talk about excess inventory? Well, let's back up a little bit. I gave an example where the marketing team is promoting a product and production team is selling and manufacturing, rather, a completely different product. What that is going to do is that is going to lead to problems with inventory. You're going to have too much of the product that you're not promoting, not enough of the one that you are. And that's going to be really detrimental to the organization's efficiency. Okay? Keep in mind, a lot of organizations don't have huge operating margins. A lot of times you will see when you take finance, when you take accounting, and you really look at these companies' balance sheets. Some of the biggest companies have a profit margin in the single digits. They're very successful, but that's not a lot of room for error. Okay? These errors can really affect the long-term sustainability of a business. And then lastly, poor organizational coordination can just cause a lack of visibility. So essentially, you can't see the process of an order. You can't see where an order is at. You cannot see how a process is doing. You're basically left in the dark with that sort of stuff. So, a couple examples of this exact thing happening. In the year 2000, Nike made a mistake between their production functional unit as well as their sales functional unit. Sales functional unit ran a promotion on a shoe, and the production functional unit made a different shoe. And you might think that's a small problem, they just sort of adjust the marketing, but the problem is they already spent the money on the marketing. So that actually led to a $100 million loss. Think about that for a second. That was 20% of the market capitalization of Nike was gone because of one mistake in communication. That's how important this can be. The similar thing happened between Nintendo and their suppliers. Nintendo had great internal communication, but they weren't communicating with the suppliers that they relied on to make their gaming consoles. This was in 2007, so they were launching the Wii, and they couldn't keep up with the demand because they did not communicate the demand with their suppliers. Okay, and that led to, by some estimates, a $1 billion loss. And that's really vital to avoid that type of thing. Now, what do these two problems have in common? They have in common the fact that they relate to a lack of communication. So, that is something that we want to avoid. Now, having said that, let's take a look at some of these communication problems, okay? So essentially, the previous slide there mentions what happens when you don't have a shared enterprise resource planning system. Okay, and just to recap, an enterprise resource planning system, like I mentioned earlier, it's an information system that every functional unit within the organization uses. So they all share it. That means that the information that one functional unit has, other functional units can see. So production team can see the orders that are being placed as they come in. The warehouse team is able to see that. It saves a lot of rework, and it greatly enhances organizational communication. Now, organizational communication isn't the same way that two people would communicate. Okay? I don't know about you. Okay, I don't ever give relationship advice in class. But let me just tell you this one thing. Don't set up an information system with your significant other and just post updates to it and expect that to be all you need to do in a relationship. It's a lot more than that as a person. As a functional unit, however, that's exactly the best way. Nothing drives people in a workplace more crazy than getting a bunch of emails repeatedly, than having constant phone calls. That drives people crazy. They can't focus on their work. So the best way to get information to people is not by calling them. It's not by emailing them. It's by having a system that's going to automatically give them exactly the information that they need. And that is what the enterprise resource planning system does. So, having said that, we'll go ahead and give a good definition of a business process. So a business process is a sequence of tasks or activities that take a set of inputs and convert them into desired outputs. Now, what's not said here is that a business process is something that's done over and over and over and over. It's not a one-time thing. We'll talk more about a business project a little bit later in the semester. A business project is not something that's done over and over. A process by comparison, is something that's done over and over. So essentially, we think about it as something like a payroll. Now look, I don't know about you, I don't want to just get paid once. I like to get paid over and over. I like my payroll to be done not just one time, but to be done repeatedly. Anything done repeatedly is a process. Okay, we think about sales. There's going to be processes for sales. And let's take a look at this generic business process to see what it typically looks like. So we start off with an input, then we have some different processing steps, and we're left at the end with output. So this could be relating to stuff like procurement, where we have buying of materials. Maybe we are buying various supplies to be able to conduct our business. This could be relating to stuff like production, actually making a sellable and a marketable product or service. Order fulfillment. Okay, these are all common business processes. Now here's some other examples of business processes. Okay, so maybe you're a big skateboarding fan, and these examples are really going to click with you. If you're not, I still think that thinking about this from the concept of a skateboard will work. Now, why did I pick skateboard here? Well, a skateboard has several different components that are pretty apparent. Look, I'm not a skater or anything, but I know they have a board. I know they have wheels, okay? And they're going to have screws to attach those wheels to the board. There's going to be different grips you can put on. There's going to be different designs. There's a lot of customization. There's different shapes. So having said that, we think about some business processes that could be used in that. We could buy skateboard parts. That's going to be procurement. We're going to be obtaining those parts. We're going to be researching. We're going to be placing the order for the quantity of parts that we want. We can make the skateboard. So we have the parts. We're going to gather the parts. We're going to have an assembly process. We're going to have maybe a Q&A task associated with that, where we do some quality control and quality assurance. And then we can sell the skateboards that we've made. That's going to be the fulfillment process. We're going to have various tasks within inside of that process. We're going to take an order. We're going to collect an order. We're going to send that order information to the warehouse, and that could be automated, okay? Warehouse is going to find the board that the customer purchased. They're going to ship it. They're going to wrap it up first, of course, package it, ship it to the customer. The customer is going to receive it. The customer is going to pay. And then that's going to be the fulfillment process. That's the order fulfillment. So here's that order fulfillment process in a little bit more detail. And maybe you're a fan of The Office, and maybe you recognize those individuals there. So essentially, this is order fulfillment is an example here of a cross-functional business process. Because notice that we have the business process starting from receiving the customer order all the way to receiving payment. And then there's a sequential set of tasks there. Now, each of those are done by a different functional unit. Okay, so we have receiving the order from the sales functional unit. Preparing the shipment comes from the warehouse functional unit. Sending the invoice, that's going to be accounts receivable. Okay? Receiving the payment, those are different functional units. Anytime you have a business process involving two or more functional units, that is by definition a cross-functional business process. So, that's a lot of prefacing information to help us understand how exactly we can model business processes. So, we have business process model notation to help us with that. Business process model notation, or BPMN for short. That's the emerging standard for modeling business processes. Now, having said that, it's the standard we use in this class. It is a very widely used standard for modeling business processes in the United States and in American businesses. It's not the only approach you can take, but it's a standardized one that's very common in the US. So we think then about some of the different careers that are available. As of 2023, there is the position that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you don't know, that's a federal organization that collects information about all sorts of different careers and it publishes it. So, sort of the closest job that I could find to a business process manager or a business process modeler is a management analyst. And I pulled the information to see some information about the business analyst, or management analyst rather. You can see their median pay listed there, some of the entry-level education requirements, some of the different job outlook. You can see this is a job that's growing, and some additional information listed there. So essentially, it's not a perfect match, but if it's something that interests you, it's definitely a skill set to have. I don't know of too many jobs that are only going to be modeling business processes. But if you can model business processes, if you can analyze business cases, if you can do all of these different things, maybe consulting or maybe a management analyst would be a role you would enjoy. So essentially, like I kind of mentioned earlier, we're going to be using business process model notation in this class. Not the only way we could do this. There's a couple other alternatives listed there, unified modeling language or business process execution language. We're not going to use any of those though. We are going to stick with business process model notation. Now, if you haven't paid attention to anything so far, really want to start paying attention right about here. Because this is where we begin to talk about what specifically a business process and business process model notation looks like. So you can see there, it's comprised of these four things. So we have first the event. Now, we're going to represent our events with a circle. And an event is something that instantly happens. So maybe we receive an order. A customer's placed an order, we receive the order, that is an event. We don't do any additional processing to that. The example in the slide says an invoice has been received. A lot of times that's what an event is going to be. You receive something. It's essentially something that just instantly happens without any processing. Next you have the task/activity. Now a task/activity, unlike an event where it instantly happens without any involvement from you, it just kind of comes about with no additional work. A task and activity is something that does have some amount of work that you have to do. In other words, it has a duration. There's some task that you have to spend some amount of time. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but there is some amount of time you have to spend on it. We connect our events, we connect our tasks and activities, we connect our gateways using flows. Now a flow is directional. So it is going to point from one event or task or gateway to the next event, task, or gateway. And then lastly, we have gateways. Gateways are going to be used to essentially separate out different flows to allow multiple things to happen or multiple options to happen, and also to take those differing flows and combine them into one flow. Now, I know that's a lot of information. Let's take a look at some examples of a business process model in business process model notation. Here we have an insurance policy, and you'll see right there that there's a little green circle. Now we said that the circles are going to be events. That's something that happens automatically without any sort of additional processing. I think in this case, we can assume that the event that starts this business process off, even though it's not listed here, it should be listed here, but no one's perfect. The event that starts this off is going to be someone files a claim. So we receive, therefore, as an insurance company, we receive that claim. That is going to be the event. Then we have the task to check the policy. We're going to see what policy the customer has. Notice after that, we're going to have a gateway. Now, the gateway is going to be used to separate out the flow between either having valid coverage or not having valid coverage. You'll see up here at the top for that task is going to be reject the claim. That's if they don't have valid coverage, and then the event that ends it is going to be the claim rejected. If they do have valid coverage, we evaluate the claim. We send forms to the client. We receive the forms back from the client. Then we have another gateway. And what that gateway is doing there is it's basically giving us a breaking point to see, hey, is this a completed claim or is it not a completed claim? If it's not a completed claim, we're going to go back and try to get more information. We're going to go back to evaluating the claim after that. But if it is enough, we're going to register the claim and go ahead and accept the claim. So, let's talk about some other order management processes that we could talk about. So, if we have the order management process here, we know that our event that starts us off is going to be we receive an order. Then we're going to see whether we have everything in stock that we need to fulfill the order. Okay, if we do, then we're going to go ahead and ship the goods and we're going to collect the payment. Those are the conceptual ideas about what we're going to be doing in this order management process. So we can take those conceptual ideas and we can go ahead and put that into business process model notation. You'll see there that we have the event starting it off. We receive an order. We first check the stock availability. We have a gateway where we either accept or confirm, in this case, the order, or we reject the order. And that's going to be based on the stock. If we reject the order, then we have an event that ends that just basically ends the order. If we confirm the order, we both send the invoice and ship the goods. Okay, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just do one or the other there. So that is what we're going to be doing. Now, I want to add just a little bit to gateways because sometimes it can be difficult to really understand on a gateway, are we doing both things or are we doing one or the other? So going back to the example that I just had, where we looked at that problem and we said we can either accept the order or not accept the order. We can't do both. We cannot both accept and reject the order. It's a binary decision. There's two outcomes. There's not three. There's not four. There's not an infinite amount of outcomes. There's two outcomes to that decision. Well, in that case, only one of those paths can be taken. What that means from a logical perspective, and that's, mathematical logic here, it's an exclusive decision. We either confirm the order, we either reject the order, but we don't do both. We model that in business process model notation with an X. You'll see that gateway listed there. Okay, that is going to be a decision where you do one or the other, but not both. Now, in contrast, we have a parallel gateway. Now, if we go back to the exclusive gateway for a little bit, I mentioned it's, a logical sort of arithmetic decision. That is going to be a logical or. We do one or the other. Represent that with an X. In contrast, we have a parallel gateway. The parallel gateway is going to be a logical and, which means we do both. So essentially, we don't just ship the good, we don't just collect the payment, we have to do both of those things. If you have a gateway where you do 2, 3, 4, 5 different things, that's going to be represented there using a parallel gateway. The symbol for that is going to be the plus. So let's revisit this a little bit and let's go ahead and place those symbols on our gateways. We check the stock availability and that gives us an exclusive gateway. We represent the exclusive gateway with the X, which tells us we either reject the order or we confirm the order, but we don't do both. We pick one or the other. That's what exclusive means. It's an or logical decision. Then if we confirm the order, we have a parallel gateway to send the invoice and ship the goods. We don't just send the invoice. We don't just ship the goods. We do both. And then if you begin a parallel gateway, you're going to recombine the flows with another parallel gateway. And then you have one flow moving forward after you recombine the flows. So that's what you're doing with this example here. So one more thing, and this is the last thing we're going to add here, is talking about pools and lanes. So, we just had the Olympics not too long ago. And one of the most famous events in the Summer Olympics is pools. That's not really an event. All the diving, all the swimming, those are all done in pools. And if you take a close look at those pools, you'll see that it's a very large body of water that is sectioned off by lanes. That's very similar to pools and lanes in a business process model. Now, here is the difference. This is very important that you understand this. A pool is for independent organizational entities. Okay, so think about that. One company is one pool. If we were modeling an order fulfillment process, we would have the company inside of their own pool. And we might have a separate pool for customer. We might have a separate pool for our supplier. We would have a separate pool for someone outside of the company. Okay? In contrast, we can take a pool and we can organize it into lanes. Now, here's where the understanding of a functional unit is going to come into play. A functional unit is going to be represented in its own lane. So you have a company pool, and you might have a functional unit for sales. That's going to be in a sales lane. You might have a functional unit involved in the process for warehouse. That's going to be in its own warehouse lane. You might have a functional unit for maybe IT. That would be involved in an IT lane. Whatever functional units are involved in the business process are going to be expressed in their lanes. Now, to recap, pools for different organizations. In the project that you're doing, you will most likely have a customer pool and a company pool. And in the company pool, most likely what you will do is you will split that up into at least two lanes. Most of the time what I see done is people have a lane for some sort of production functional unit, or maybe depending on what they're doing, whatever the primary business activity is, that's typically going to be one of the lanes of the pool. And then the other kind of depends on what their business idea is. Sometimes they have a warehouse or a shipping or an order fulfillment functional unit. You're just figuring out at least two functional units that are involved in the business process that you choose to model. Those go into the company pool as two or more lanes. So we go back and we look at a different example here. This is an application process where a candidate creates an application and submits it. Okay, so we have two pools. One of the pools here at the top is for the job candidate. So the job candidate does not belong to the organization yet. Below that, we have a separate pool for the company. Within the company pool, we split that into two lanes. One of the lanes is for recruiter. That's this top lane of the company pool. The second lane is for the interviewer. And the cool thing about these business processes is that the order of task and the order of every order, basically, be it a task, a gateway, an event, it's all left to right. It's not up and down. The order comes from left to right. So you can see that creating an application occurs before anything else because you cannot possibly evaluate an application until it's been created. That's why this is one of the furthest left tasks. Okay, then when it's submitted, then it can go out to the recruiter. The recruiter is going to do the review process. I'm not going to go through this entire process. I think you should probably look at it. But essentially, this is really here to help us better understand pools and lanes. Okay, so this is a basic way you can do it. Okay, you have a pool for an organization. Could be a client, could be a customer, could be a company, could be all sorts of different things. Okay, and then you split up that pool if there's more than one functional unit. There's not always going to be. But if you have a cross-functional business process, by definition, you will have at least 2 lanes because each lane belongs to one functional unit. Let's go back then to our order management process, and let's go ahead and apply everything that we've done to it. Everything that we've learned about, rather. So here, we've gone ahead and we've split this process up into a customer pool and into a supplier pool. Because the customer and supplier are not the same organization. So then, we've taken all the tasks for customer, we've placed them into their pool, keeping in mind the order of tasks left to right. So we place the purchase order before we check the stock availability. Now we're going to confirm the order and send an invoice before we receive the customer's payment, because the customer doesn't make the payment until they get the invoice. You can tell that by this very distinct, and it's kind of difficult to tell if you're not paying attention. But the order is from left to right. Even though customer is a higher pool, it's just the pool that's on top, in other words, this particular task to make a payment is further to the right than this task to send invoices. That's what I mean by the fact that the further to the right a task is, regardless of its height, the further right it is, the later it's going to happen in the business process. Otherwise, we simply took all the tasks and activities and gateways and we split them by customer and supplier. But we're still not quite done with this because we need to split the supplier pool into lanes. So to split the supplier pool into lanes, what we're going to do, we're going to come up with the functional units that are involved inside of this cross-functional business process. And what we have done is we've said that we have a sales and distribution functional unit and we have a warehouse functional unit. So we take all the stuff that applies to the sales and distribution functional unit, we place it into that sales and distribution lane inside of the supplier pool. We do the same thing with warehouse. In this case, you'll see that the only thing the warehouse does, the only task that they do, is they ship the product. That's the only thing inside of their lane. So, we can revisit the insurance claim example as well. Now, essentially, we showed this at the beginning of this, where we're creating the checking the policy, either rejecting the claim or evaluating it further, and so forth. And we can go ahead and split this into the customer lane, or customer pool rather, and essentially the insurance company pool. And with inside of that, we're going to have a lane inside of the company pool for customer service. That's that top lane there. And also claims handling is going to be in a different lane. And we just essentially take each of those task activities and gateways, put them where they belong. So, here's what you're doing for this upcoming assignment. You're going to be using the same business process, I misspoke there. Using the same business idea that you had from the previous assignment, which was the business model canvas. You're going to be thinking of a business process that it would do. Okay, so a lot of times people pick order fulfillment. People might pick how they're going to make their product, how they're going to make their service, how they're going to provide their service. You could pick any business process at all. Just something that the business is going to do over and over. You could pick how the business is going to hire employees. I don't care what business process you pick. You could pick any business process, but what you're going to do is you're going to model that business process out using business process model notation. Now, here's the catch there. You need to have at least 2 pools. Most of the time what I see is a pool for your company and a pool for your customer. You can deviate from that if it makes sense. I don't really care what you pick. Just make sure you pick something logical that fits with what you're doing. Now, once you've done that, what you want to do is essentially you want to then go ahead and you want to take your company pool and come up with at least 2 lanes for it. Those 2 lanes are going to be 2 functional units that are involved inside of your business process. So, once you've done that, you're going to basically then put in the different task activities and gateways, making sure to label the gateways as either exclusive or parallel. Just a brief recap there. The exclusive gateways, you do one or the other. Represent that with an X on the gateway. Parallel gateway, you represent that with a plus. It means you're doing all of the tasks, okay? You're going to have beginning events and you're going to have end events. You're going to label everything. You can use any software that you want. Doesn't matter to me. You can certainly use draw.io. You could use Visio. You could handwrite. You could go into Word and you could put shapes on the page using Word. It doesn't matter to me. Just make sure that you export it to a standard format. .jpeg works great. You could also use .png. You could use .pdf, .docx. One of those standard formats, totally fine. Just make sure that you get this submitted by the due date. Other than that, best of luck on it. I look forward to seeing all of you back either Friday or next week, whenever. And I do hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope this was helpful. Have a great day.